So as I've said earlier, we've run through the revision from last week's class, and we are going to be starting this session afresh. So the purpose of this class is to build our first application, which is a to-do app, right? So first things first, we are obviously going to need to create our application. We are not going to be using this one because this is solely for learning new things and learning new tricks. So now let's create a new application on here. That says, okay, I open up my terminal. You remember the process of creating a new application. I open up my terminal and I try to
Yes, sir. I don't know, but we cannot see your screen. You're not showing your screen.
my bad. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
My bad. So I said we are trying to create a new project, right? So I say change directory to my desktop, right? Inside my desktop, change directory to projects, right? Inside my projects, change directory to pp. And inside here, I want to say npx creates React application, right? What's the name of my application? To do app, right? And I save and I press enter. What does this do? It creates my React application for me, does all the boilerplating and serves it to me on a platter of gold. So while this downloads, if you have any other questions you want to ask me, please let me know.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I came in late, and uh, and then last week, let me say, I wasn't around too. So from what I've met when I came in, I found out that many people have done so far. Well, I don't know if there's any video on this. Maybe the one that you did last week.
So that was why we did some kind of revision as at when this class started.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
But the video for last week class will also be uploaded into our YouTube page. Right. So it is going to be joined together with this one so
okay,
that you
okay,
can have everything together.
okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. All right, so it seems our application has been created. So like before, we would cd into our application to do app, right? And then I run this to open up my VS Code, right? Just this guy. No. So if I come here and say npm start, right? We are going to see, yes, I would like to run this up on another port. why I got that error or why I got that prompt was because I had an application running on my localhost 3000. So this is my new application running on localhost 3001. And I can come here, I can come to my code, come to my SRC folder, right? SRC folder. And then let's simplify this application a little bit. Let's delete some things that we're not going to be using. For now, delete this guy, move to trash, report web vitals, trash. Right, let's say app.jsx, delete, app.test.jss, delete. And then we know app.js, index.js, we move this guy. Where else? Says report vital is not defined online. Where? Yeah. All right, so we are good to go. Our public folder in our index.html, we can come here and say, we can give this a title, right? We can give this a title of to do app, right? And what's the implication of this? If I come here, it changes the name on the tab name to do app, right? So now that I've gotten this out of my way, the next thing for me to do is to come to my app.js, which is where I have all of this beautiful UI, this spinning image, this spinning logo. Now, what do I want to do? I want to, what type of styling do I want to implement on this guy? I want to implement the, let's say I want to use Tailwind, for example. That's a CSS framework, right? And from what we learned last week, to import Tailwind into your system, all you have to do is go to the Tailwind documentation, right? You go to get started, right? Get started installation, and you look for framework guides. And what guide are we using? Create React app. So basically, it teaches you how to create your projects from creating the project to starting the project. So this is where we'll start from. We install tailwind.css, right? So let me create a new what's tailwind.css, and you will see that in your package, right? This has been installed in your dev dependencies, right? If we come back here, we take another one, we said npx tailwind css init, which basically creates a tailwind.config file in your, it creates a tailwind.config file in your source folder, in your root folder, my bad. And once you have this, you have this file here, right? So next step you are going to take is, you want to look at the module.export. You want to see what content your what's it called can support, your Tailwind framework, what pages or what files in your CSS, in your React application is it going to support. So basically you can just copy everything that's here and replace it down here. So what this basically means is that every single file in your source folder with the JS extension, JSX extension, TSX extension would be supported with Tailwind, right? So now that we have this out of the way, you can come down to the next step, copy these three guys and come all the way to your index.css, which is your root CSS folder, right? Your root CSS file. You paste this here in your index.css, right? And once you've done that, next thing for you to do is npm run start. So now that we have done all the things necessary, I made a comment last week that whenever you install a new package into your application, first thing you want to do is stop your server and run it again, right? npm start. So with this, we get this guy up and running again. And how would we know if our Tailwind CSS works? next thing we have to do is just come down to our index.js, no, not index.js, app.js. Come down here and try to give this a class name, a Tailwind class name, and say this should be text3xl, right? We come back here and we see that this has been changed. Or we can say text red 600, and we see that Tailwind has been successfully installed in our application. So that being said, first thing I want to do is I want to remove everything that we have here. Right. Once I remove this guy, and I have my empty page like this, I can say, let me say H1. I say this is my roots page. This is my roots page, right? By default, what we are going to see is this guy on the screen. Now, how do I make sense of what you are saying here? How do I make sense of this? But we definitely know that our application, our to-do app, would be like a single level application, a single page application, right? So we can decide to write all of our code here, right? All of our code for our to-do list, right? We can decide to write all of our code here, but I would say we try to make use of everything that we've learned from last class, right? And do something a little bit different. So I'm going to stop the server here, and then I'm going to try npm install React router DOM, right? I'm going to install this guy. Let's wait for it to install. When we install this guy, and then I'm going to come here and say import browser router as router, right? So I'm importing browser router as router, then I'm importing routes, and I'm also importing route, these three things. So which one is the parent wrapper? That would be the router. That's the router. Then inside my router, I have my routes wrapper, which contains all the routes I'll have on my my React application. Then I can start by defining my first route, right? It is a self-closing tag. I'll pass the path for that route. I can call it /home, right? I can call it /home, and then I have to pass in another property, another element into this guy, which is the element, right? This takes in a React component, but we don't have a what's it called? A default landing page yet. So what will I do? I would come to my source folder and say, let me create a default landing page. I can say landing, let me call this landing page. Sorry, let me call it landing page, that's fine. Landing page, right? .jsx, right? So we now have export default function, right? Landing. We have this guy right here, right? This returns a JSX of this. No, let me put in a p tag. This is my new home page, right? I save this guy right here. And now I can now successfully pass in my landing page. So first thing I want to do is I want to import landing page, right, from /landing page, which is basically the route to this file. So basically, all I now have to do is pass in landing as a prop to this route. Once I have that, I can come here and say /home. Or do I say this size? Oh, sorry, my bad. I have to. Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys still hear me? Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Hello. I don't know. Is it me or because I can't see the screen, I can't hear anything. I don't know whether I want to confirm if it's my network.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, but your screen, we can't see your screen.
Can you see my screen? Please confirm if you can see my screen. All right. So what I'm saying now is I'm going to start from this page, right? And the first thing I want to do is I want to create a container, right? Since I'm using a CSS framework, which is Tailwind, I can just go ahead and say I want this to be widthful. I want it to take the full width. I want this to take the full height. I want this to be displayed flex. I want this to be displayed. I want to align center or item center, right? I want item center and say justify center. So first thing I want to do is let me test it. Let me test this out. Let me see whether this works. I can say testing container. And I get, where's my application? I get this, right? So now I can go ahead and say, okay, fine. Let me make this width screen, which basically is Tailwind for making your width 100% viewport width. And the same thing, height screen, making your height 100% viewport height. So if I save this guy, this testing center should be in the middle here. All right, so basically, this is how you can, what's it called, center a div, basically using flex, item center, justify center. So right, now I'm going to be coming in here and I'm going to say I want to start by creating. So first of all, we are creating a to-do list, right? Let me give this a background of BG. Let's go to Tailwind, because I said it's not just easy for you to know Tailwind styling just like that. You can go back and forth with the documentation, however it is you want to learn, right? Text decoration, background color. Right. So we can say BG slate 900. We can say BG slate 900 to give us the particular shade we are looking for. And if we do that, we get this particular shade. So now our application is looking a little bit better, right? So now I can come down here and say, I want to create my first input or my first addition to this application. First thing would be, I would have to create an input, right? An input and a button that allows me type things and add things to a list, right? So that being said, let's say I'll put this as a div and say display flex, right? Gap 2, 3, item center with, let's say 50%, right? And Tailwind is a mobile first CSS package. So basically what this means is that every styling that you are saying here is you're basically styling for your mobile phone, and it allows you do mobile responsiveness on the go. So I can say with full for this, but on medium screens, right? Or on medium screens, I want to leave it as with 50%, right? 50%. And then what do I want to do? I want to type in my input, right? My input is of a what? Is of a type text, right? The name is to do item, not to do input. Right? The ID also to do input. Right? Placeholder, please enter a task, right? And then we can now go ahead and say we want to save this. Okay, so let's see. And then the next thing would be to add the button, right? So we can say button dot fit, which is basically width fit content, height fit content, px padding horizontal. We can put it at 3, padding vertical. That's 1. So
can you let us take a break if they want it? If they don't want, we can continue.
do you guys want to? We
Let
just
us know.
got the.
We just started, have we?
We just started. We are just filling the class, but if they want to take a break, that's fine.
I continue if they don't want. Continue. All right.
All right. So we have as I was saying, we are creating our button now to be width fit, height fit, you know, padding horizontal 3, padding vertical Y, and I want to give it a rounded, I want to make it rounded. I want to give the border radius of, you know, I want to give it a little bit of curve on the borders, right? And then let me say BG, no, dot BG white, dot text slate 900, right? So now I can now say save. Okay, it's looking more like it. So if I save this guy, this is what I'm going to get in my code. This is what I'm going to get in my page, but this is not exactly what I expect this to look like. So now how do I make this better? I can say item center. I can now decide to say justify center. What does this go? This puts this whole thing in the middle, right? So now let me style my input because I forgot to style that earlier. I can give it a padding of 3, right? And then make it a little bit rounded. And then let me say rounded LG. Let me make this rounded LG also. Then I want to say border none. Save this guy and what do we get? We have this. Please enter a task. Very good. Right. So we can decide to give this particular div a border. Can say border 1 pixels. Border color. Let's give it a border color of hashtag CCC, right? And then we have something like this. Then we can give it a padding because right now it does not have a padding. We can give it a padding of 3, and then it becomes this. And inside all of this, obviously, another thing we need to do is make sure it is rounded. And then we can say rounded LG. Or in this case, say rounded XL. Makes it a little bit more rounded, right? And then I can decide to say, since this is looking a little bit off, how do I better improve on this design? Let me make the border color a little bit duller and say I want to fade it by 70%, right? So now it is a little bit duller. I want to increase the width of the inputs to, I can say width, if I say width full, what happens? It becomes this, right? And then we can now decide to enter a value here. Once we can enter a value here, our first task has been solved. Now we have to make sense of this value. We have to make sense of this value that we have here. So first thing we have to do when we're trying to make use of inputs like that, we want to set whatever value that we are getting from that input to a state. That means we are going to be using the useState hook. So we can say const inputs. We can call it to do let me not call it to do input. Can say imputed task, right? Imputed task, and we'll say set imputed task to use states, right? And we put a default value of an empty string. If we have this guy right here, the next thing I want to do is I want to give this a value, right? Give this a value of imputed task because it only makes sense that the value of this input would be this state here, because whatever it is I type into this input would have to come to this state. But if I save this guy and I come here, you would realize I am not able to type anything into this input because now I have decided to change this input from being an uncontrolled input to a controlled one, meaning that I have decided to manually handle how this input takes in changes. That means I'll have to come here and put an event on the input and say, when this input changes, right, it will take in a callback function, right? It takes in the parameter of E, which is the event itself. And then I want to set imputed task, right? I want to set imputed task to e.target.value, which means that if I come here and I type all of this now, it becomes easy for me to type. Now, we've made this input functional. We need to make this button functional as well. And let me say I'm trying to, okay, add a little bit of action to my button. I can give it a padding Y of 2 and a PX of 4, right? I can say on hover, right? Make the background color BG Slate 900 and make the, on hover, make the text white, right? So now, if I save this guy, on hover, this is what I get, right? Let me also give it a border on hover, right? I can say on hover, right? I want to have BG, what did I put here? BG hashtag 76, blah, 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 blah. Paste it here and give it a border of 1 pixel. So whenever I hover over it, this is exactly what I get. Oh no, it's supposed to be border, not BG. So this is exactly what I get whenever I hover over this guy. So now we are looking a little bit more alive. How do I make my button functional? I have to pass an event to my button also to make sure that whenever an event occurs on this button, meaning whenever I click this button or whatever, if I want to make my event hover, whenever I hover on this button, I want something to happen. But that's technically is not a good design and is not a good way of handling things. So I can decide to say, I want to pass an on-click event on this button. So basically what I'm doing is that it takes in a callback function, right? Takes in a callback function. I can basically say on clicking this button, I want to use a what's it called? A primitive JavaScript function like alert. I want to alert imputed task, right? So if I save this guy now, I come here. Well, first of all, I come here and I say, go to the mall. If I save this guy, I get this prompt up here as per go to the mall, which is fine. If I reload, this goes away. If I decide to save this, you can see that this is still coming up, right? So we can save ourselves this task or save ourselves this headache with passing in a conditional statement here that says if imputed task is not equal to an empty string rather, then I want to alert imputed tasks. Else, alert kindly insert a task to begin, right? So this is basically just, you doing some error checking so that your clients, your users don't move or force an error in your application that would end up breaking your code, right? So now if I click on save, it says kindly insert a task to begin because I've not imputed anything yet. Then if I decide to say, okay, read my books and I save, then this item gets alerted onto the screen. Now that we have done this, we see that we've just, created an input and we've created a button and we've made both of them functional. We can now move on to, we can decide to say, okay, fine. I want to do the next step, right? I want to do the next step, which would be to create another div, which would be to create, you would agree with me that when you have a to-do list, you would agree with me that you should have a section of your screen where you can view all your items in your to-do list. You would agree with me when I say that, right? So I can decide to carry out this guy, right? I can decide to carry out, maybe copy this guy down here, right? Because I want to copy the same container, right? I want to copy the same container, and I can give this a height of, let's say, a height of 400 pixels, right? Just because I know I want to give it a defined height. And then I delete everything I have inside here, right? Once I save this, I get this. Why do I get this? Because on my parent container down here, up here rather, I have decided to flex these items. So what I can do to solve this problem is put these two containers into a singular div, right? Which solves my problem as does. But now I have to make sure that this div takes in the appropriate width mechanism, or the appropriate width of its parent container. And one thing you want to avoid whenever you're styling or whenever you're creating your pages or your components or whatever is, you want to avoid using fixed heights or fixed values as much as possible. You want to use either rems or percentage to help you scale your project or scale your interfaces on a much more mobile responsive level, right? So if I save this guy, I get this, right? And then I still have to remove this from here with full, so with full, then I have this guy right here. So basically, all I've done is I've created my first container, which houses my input and my button to save that input, that new task item. And I've created a second container, which houses every single one of my to-do list item, which is fine. So now I can decide to give this guy a little bit of margin, top and bottom, and give it a margin of 4. I save, I get this in my page. Now that we've gotten here, the next thing would be to design or to build my to-do application or my to-do item, right? So I can come here, right? So first of all, we are going to write all the code to build this entire application in one file, right? We're going to write it in one file. And after we are done writing it, we're now going to break it down into several components and make you see how clean this landing page can be, because you have segmented your entire code into several other components, right? So that being said, let's look at how to do that. So first thing I want to do is I want to create a new item that says with full, right? With full, then I want this to be BG white. I want this to have a white background. I want this to be rounded LG, right? I want this to have a padding of, 2, right? What else? Then I want this to be flexed, right? Flex, then justify between, right? Which basically justify items, justify contents between, right? And then I want to items center, right? So that being said, let's see what we have. Let me type in something like, hello, this is my first to-do item. What do we get? We get this bad guy. Now, we do not want to make it we don't want to make it item center, right? We don't want to do this, right? I don't think we need to flex it. We don't need to flex this container. So we come here and this is what we get. Hello, this is my first to do item. How can I make this item a lot better? Let me put this in a p tag first. P tag, right? And then save this guy. So now we have this text item. Let me say, I want to give this a class name of text, rather font semi-bold, right? Font semi-bold, text SM, right? And let's see what we get. This is my first to do item. Okay, text SM is a little bit too small. Let's say text 18 pixels, right? 18 pixels, and this is what we get. And in the middle of this, I want to obviously have a button here or an icon here to delete this guy. So right now we are still working on designing or building the interface for this to do item. So I can go to my browser, and look for a React icon, what's it called? My React icon library, right? So this is an external library. And if I want to use this library, all I have to do is come to the home and start by saying npm installed React icons save. So I'm going to copy this guy and then come down to my terminal and then save this guy, push this guy here and save. That installs, come here, Control C, and then I restart my server over here. Once that is done, /home. So once this is done, the next thing I want to do is I want to import an icon from my icon library. So I can come here and type trash, right? So I can see several icons from several icon libraries, right? I have BS trash fill. Let me use BS trash fill. Can come here, copy this guy, right? Copy this guy down here, paste it here as an HTML tag. Copy this guy, come here, paste it here as my import, right? So now this is not throwing any error whatsoever. I can come here and I prefer to use, I like to use React icons because it allows you, it gives you the liberty to also style your icon. So I can say, give this a color of red, text red 600, and I want to make it text SM, and I save this guy, and this is what I'm going to get. Why am I not getting anything? Let me reload this guy. Okay, so this is what I get now. So basically I can give it, I can make it cursor pointer, right? So basically, come here. So now we've designed our first to do item. Now, how do we now link this input to this block of code that we've written here? The first thing we would have to do is we can say, okay, this is our to do item div. We can say, we can render it conditionally, and we can say if imputed task is equal to an empty string, or it's not equal to an empty string, rather, it's not equal to an empty string, then we want to render this particular div, right? We can do this, right? So that would now mean that I can come here and confidently say, I want this to be represented by imputed task, right? Because now I am passing this imputed task as a p text in this p tag here. If I save this guy, you will see I have nothing in my what's it called? In my user in my task list component. But if I decide to type here and say take kids to school, we can see that we have now added a singular user, a singular to-do item. But the problem remains, if we implement this code like this, or this problem like this, we would only be able to add one list item. And the minute we reload, that list item leaves, right? There's no way for us to do. So now, how do we tackle this problem? What that means is that we want to have another state called to-do items, right? To-do items. And then we want to have this to be set to-do items, right? And then this is going to be an array. The initial, what's it called? The initial value for this to-do items is going to be an empty array, right? So now what I can do is, nope. What I can do is, I can decide to, make this, once this is an empty array, the next thing I want to do is I want to change the logic here to say, if my array, right, if this array dot length, you know, we have the length property, right? I can come here and say, if to-do items dot length, right, is less than 1. Sorry, is greater than, what's it called? Is greater than 0, right? If to-do items dot length is greater than 0, what that means is that if the total number of items in this to-do items is greater than 0, in these to-do items, if the number of elements in this array is greater than 0, then I want to render this component. So what that means is that if I save this guy and I come here, I'm not going to see anything, right? Even if I decide to type as much as I want to type here, I am not going to see anything, which is what we are looking for. Now, how do I make it so that whenever I type something and I click on this save button, then I can have this what's it called? I can have this list item up here. What we have to do is we have to write a function, right? We define a function called, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi went off. So now I'm connected to my phone. Right. So let's see how to make this work. We are talking about how we want to write a function to we're talking about how to write a function to satisfy our problem that we have here. Right. So first of all, we want to have inside this function, we are going to write some things. We're going to define some things. I can first of all carry all of these things I have here, right? Carry it and paste it here, right? So I can say if imputed task is not equal to an empty string, then I want to alert this. Or I can decide to change this guy and say if imputed task is equal to an empty string, I want to alert, kindly insert a task to begin, right? But when it is not equal to an empty string, I don't just want to alert what that thing is. I want to create an object. I want to basically add it to to this array, right? So I can decide to say, let me say, add item. I can decide to say, set to do items, right? Into set to do items. I can write it like this. We spread to do items, and then we pass in imputed task. So what this does is that it spreads whatever items you have in your to-do list, in your to-do items state before. Initially, it spreads it, and then it adds this new item into it, because why? States are, we cannot just decide to come and say we want to say to do items dot push, right? And then we push imputed task into it. It won't work because what? States are immutable, right? You cannot change the current instance of a state. You can only change that state into something else, right? So what I'm saying is that if I have a string, if like right now, if let's say, for example, my imputed task default value is fee, right? Whenever I want to change the value of this state, I cannot change the instance of this fee, right? I cannot change the instance of this state, right, to another, let's say, FE. I have to change the state completely from the first instance to the second instance of FE, right? So what that means is that the first instance of that FEE has come and has gone, right? I can't use that instance again since I've changed it to FE, and I cannot change that instance. The same thing with FE. I cannot decide to change the second instance of this state, but I can change it to another instance of FEEE. Do you get? So that's basically what it means to say states are immutable. And the same thing happens to this guy. But for arrays, I can decide to say, okay, fine, let me spread this item in this array and add this new item to it. And once I save this guy, I can console.log, or rather, let me write it like this to make it to make it make sense properly. I can say const new array equals, we spread to do items in there, right? And then we add in imputed task, right? Once we can add in imputed task, let's console.log new array, right? And then I can now decide to pass in new array altogether in here, right? So let's save this to state and let's get to, so now we inspect this guy in our console. We say inspect, we can see this guy in our console, right? And let me drill down a little bit. Can say, okay, first item. I save this guy. Oh, my bad. I've not called this function, right? I defined this function, but I didn't call it in my button. So that means what I have to do is come to where I am clicking my button and passing the function to add item, and I call it. So basically, I can now come here and say, okay, fine, first item, save. I have an array of first item, right? Second item, let me remove this. Second item, save this. I have this first item, second item. So for now, I want you to ignore whatever it is that you are saying here, because we have not corrected the logic that we have here, right? So now, basically, what you are now saying is that I now have like some form of data that helps me save all my to-do items, right or wrong. So now, what I can do is I can go further ahead and say, I want to I've set it to a state. So now what I would now be doing here is, instead of rendering this guy completely, what I would decide to do is I would come here and say to do items.map, right? This takes in a callback function. Let's say to do item. That will be my value. What does it return? It returns a GSX of this guy, right? And what am I setting to, what am I imputing here to be each element in the to do item? So obviously by now we should know what it means to, you should know what it means to map over an array. You should know what this first parameter speaks to. You should know what the second parameter of an array speaks to, which is what? The index, right? And I can give this guy a key of index, right? So now, if I save this guy and I come here and I reload, you are going to see nothing on the page, right? I can come here and now say, okay, fine, I want my first item to be take kids to school. I save this guy, it is then pasted here. Good. My second item can now be pick kids from school, right? I save this guy, this is added to it. There's still a little bit of discrepancy, so I can come here and say, I want to give each element in this array, I want to give it a padding of a margin of 2, right? So now we have this looks a little bit better, right? So we can say pick kids from school. We can add another item to it and say, what's it called? Learn React from scratch. So this gives you the ability to add multiple lists to your items. Now, the problem is, it is very, very jarring and inconvenient for me to always have to delete this first before typing. So I can say, as I set to do items, I can say, at the end of all of these things, set imputed text to be an empty string back, right? So what that would mean is that if I come here and say, I want to wake up and go to work. Once I click on save, this clears away because now I have set it to its initial state of an empty string. Now that solves the problem of adding items to this list, right? But now we have another problem of removing items from this list. So what are we going to do with this problem? The best thing for us to do is we create a new function called remove item, right? Create a new function called remove item. And this function is going to take in a parameter of ID, right? It's going to take in a parameter of ID. And I'm thinking, and you must be thinking, where is this ID going to come from, right? So now, what we can do is, instead of creating this task like this, instead of creating this array in this manner, what we can do is, we can say, first things first, we want to create an object and say const obj equals a new object, right? And we can say task being the imputed task, right? Imputed task. And then ID equals, now we are going to do, like, we can use math.random, right? Come here and we say math.seal. This is just me trying to create a random ID between the values of 1 and 100, right? Create a random value, say +1. And what does this do? It legit creates a random value. So I can decide to say instead of passing imputed item straight, let me just pass in obj, which is the object, right? I save this guy and I reload. Once I reload on this guy, I can clear out my current state, right? So now if I say head to school as my first item, I save, what do I get? Objects are not valid as a React child found object. So what that means is that because I have decided to change this guy to an object, I cannot just pass in an object in here as a value or as a child to a element. So what I'll have to do is I can say to do item dot task, right? Because now my to do item on this mapping, on this callback function, represent each object in this array, and each object is represented by task and ID. So if I save this guy now, and I come here and say first item, and I save this guy, now I can see that my structure has been changed to an array of objects from an array of strings, right? So now I have first item. Second item would be head to school. I save this guy, I have head to school. And if you open this guy, you would see that we have first item and ID of NAN, which is not a number, meaning there's something I am doing wrong here. So if I save this guy, what do we get? NAN. Oh, my bad. I didn't call this function. It's supposed to be a function. Right, so let me reload. So we have head to school, pick up kids, save. And if I come here, you would see that I now have my ID represented as 50 and 95, which is fine. So now we can now confidently see that we can pass in an ID inside this function, right? Good. So we no longer need this particular if statement. So we can say we want to get a new array by filtering through the to-do items dot filter, and then we want to pass in our callback function, let's say, which represents each item, right? And we want to pass in our condition down here that says if each dot ID is equal to, we want to say if the, what's it called? Each item dot ID is not equal to the ID that is passed. We want to return that item, return each, right? So what that would mean is that I would set to do items to new array, and I can remove this guy from here. So basically, if I need to call in remove items now, I can now pass in an onClick function on this guy. OnClick function on this guy, passing my callback function, right? And then call my items to remove, my function to remove item, and passing to do item dot ID as my parameter, because this function is part of, is going to take in a parameter of ID, and this component is also part of this mapping that specifies, that speaks to each element in this to-do items array. So basically what that means is that this ID is going to be speaking to its corresponding or to its respective elements in the array. So if I save this guy now and I reload, I can say head to school, come back from school, save, go home, save. And if I want to delete this guy, all I have to do is come here, pass this guy, delete, delete, delete. Right. So now we are back to where we started from. So with this, I'm going to give you guys a break. I'm going to give you guys a break between now and what's the time now? Now and 5. Right? Take a break between now and 5 to properly assimilate what it is that we have done. Let it sink in, let it marinate into whatever it is that you want to do. And when we come back, we are going to be looking at how we want to break each and every single one of these. I want to break everything we have in this code into several other components. That being said, if you have any questions or any feedback whatsoever, let me know. Your break starts now, by the way. I'm going to export default function, input component. All right, and then I'm going to return a JSX, right? So now we have this guy. I can come, first thing I would want to do is I would want to take this entire div that houses both my input and my button. I would want to copy it, or rather remove it completely and paste it in this place. But you'd realize that in pasting it here, I can save this guy like this and then come here. All I have to do is replace where I copied it from or where I cut it from, replace it with my components that says input component, right? Closing tag. And I save this guy, right? So now if I come here, I see some errors. It says imputed task is not defined. Set imputed task is not defined. Add item is not defined, which basically means that if I come to this input component, it is telling me that my React app does not know what imputed task is. It does not know what set imputed task is, and it does not know what add items is. So what that means is that, and we remember that all of these variables and functions are coming from landing page here, which is remove item, add item, imputed task, set imputed task. It's coming from this page down here. All we have to do is come here. You ask for props called imputed task, right? Another prop would be add item. Another prop would be set imputed task, right? I save this guy and I come all the way to my landing page, right? And if I come to my landing page, since I'm asking for props on this components page, it only makes sense for me to pass those props wherever it is I'm calling the component, which means in here, I'm going to be saying imputed task, right, equals imputed task, which is a state here. Set imputed task equals set imputed task, which is a function to update my states. And then add item is equal to add item, which is also a function to add item to my to-do item state. Saving this guy brings me up to this, which means that I have now removed, I've shortened the code that I wrote here. I've compacted it into another component and I've saved it here, which can be reused in several other components, right? Let's say I have a page that has several other components where I have to reuse this particular component of adding task to a particular array, I can very much use this component for that. Right now, you can move on to the next set of components, which is my user list component, right? So what that basically means is that I come to my component and I say, let me create a new component, component file in my components folder. I can say to do list, right? .gsx, right? To do list.gsx, and in that I can say export default function, right? I can say to do list, right? In the middle of this, I want to return a JSX, right? Like we did before, all I have to do is come all the way to my to-do items, come all the way to my landing page, copy this guy, right? Copy this entire to-do items, come to your to-do list page and paste this here. When you save this, you are going to get the same error that says, first of all, you don't even see all of this here, right? So now, one thing you want to do is you want to import everything from BS View Trash, import it back into this function, right? Now, if I come to my landing page and I pass in to-do list, my to-do list functional component, right? Pass this guy in, I'm going to get a couple of errors, which says to-do items is not defined, to-do items is not defined, this is not defined, this is not defined. The same thing, I have to come to my to-do list, ask for props, right? In this instance, BS View Trash cannot be a prop because I can just as well import it into this file and save me the headache, right? So now I can say, ask for prop, I destructure my props like this and say, okay, I want to ask for to-do items. I want to ask for to-do items and I want to ask for remove item, right? I save this guy and I come all the way to my landing page. And since I'm asking for props, I only have to pass in those props. I can say to-do items equals to-do items, right? And remove item equals remove item, right? I pass this here and then I save this guy here and then this is right back, which basically means that if I come here and type head to school and I save, I'm going to see this here. I come back here and type get back from school. I save, I'm going to get this, right? So now we have all of them. If I decide to delete this, I can delete. If I decide to delete this, I can delete, right? So now that helps us with a whole lot of back and forth. So now if you're looking at your landing page component itself, you would realize your entire line of code has been reduced to what we have here. You don't need to import this guy anymore. You don't need to import this guy anymore because we don't need it here, right? It has been reduced to this guy, right? Now we can further reduce our to-do list, right? We can further reduce our to-do list by breaking this to-do list into another component and saying, I want to create a to-do item, right? To-do item.jsx. And I export default function to do item, right? And then I save this guy and then I return. What am I going to be returning? I come to my to-do list. I copy everything that looks like my to-do item, right? Copy this guy and then I pass it here, right? What does it mean to do this? Now, it's asking me for, if I save this guy and I come here and I pass to do item as a prop here. Once I save this, I get this error. Index is not defined. To do item is not defined. This is not defined. This is not defined. This is not defined. Right. So now I can just come here and say, I can come here, come to my to do item, like we always do, ask for props. I can say to do item. Right. We can say to do item. We can also say remove item. Right, which brings us to this class, this file here. Then we ask for the props that says to do item equals to do item, and then what's it called? Remove item equals remove item. And this remove item is coming from the props that is entering this to-do list component, which is in turn coming from this landing page, which we have defined here. So basically, this remove item is entering this to-do list. From this to-do list, it is being passed as a prop into this to-do item, which basically means that here we can basically say remove item and we pass in to-do item.id. We save this guy right here. And then we still have one more error, which is BS trash field is not. So I can delete this from here, come to to-do item, and then at the beginning of my page, import this file right here. So save, and what am I still missing? It says index is not defined. So basically here, I'm seeing a key of index. I don't need to pass this key inside the component here as a what's it? I don't need to pass this key here. All I have to do is remove this guy, save, and then come to my to-do list, come here, passing key as index, right? So if I come here and I decide to head to school, save, I get the same thing, get back, save, I get the same thing, which basically means that I can delete, and we are here. So right now, we've basically written a very structured React code where we have two major components, which is this first component and this second component. And we further decided to break down this second component into several other components, which is the user list and the the to-do list and the to-do item. Right. So now that we have these guys, the next thing that comes to mind while building this application is we want to make it persist. We want to make the data save, right? Because if I keep reloading this file, I come here, I type in something, I save. I come here, I type in something else, I save. Right? The minute I try to reload, that file goes away. Now, how do we solve this problem? So there is something called local storage, right? There's something called local storage in JavaScript. Local storage is basically a storage on the browser that helps you save data, right? It helps you save data on the client side, right? So we have local storage. We have several storage options. We have local storage, we have session storage, we have cookies, right? So now, there's a difference between a couple of all of this. Your session storage would save data for as long as you still remain on the page, right? For as long as you still remain on the page. The minute you close your tab, your session storage is done. It clears everything from your session storage, and then you have to repopulate that data. Now, for your local storage is the one you would most likely use on a regular basis, because that one persists data right? Even when you close your browser, even when you reload your browser, you do all forms of hard resets to your browser, right? It persists until you decide to personally remove that item or that group or those group of items from your local storage. Are we there? So that's how you can use your local storage. So now that being said, let's look into how we can actually make use of it. So now we go back to our landing page, and first things first, we say this is going to bring us to making me introduce to you your second hook, right? The second hook you're going to be learning in this class, which is a use effect, right? A use effect. And this is how the syntax goes, right? So you can say a use effect. By typing a use effect is a React hook, right? That's been imported automatically when I typed in that, when I pressed enter, it imported automatically. And it is a function that takes in two parameters, a callback function, right? And then a dependency array, right? So what does this mean? We come here, use effects would fire whatever function you have inside this callback function. To fire whatever action, or it will run whatever algorithm you have in this callback function whenever your page loads, right? And it runs, right? Your dependency array is meant to trigger this set of actions all over again. Basically, what I'm saying is that if I've decided to say I want to set imputed task to yellow, for example, right? I want to set imputed task to yellow. When I save this guy, by the time I reload, no matter how many times I reload, it is following this use effect to say set imputed task to yellow, because this is being run at the same time the page loads, right? And what does this dependency array does? What does it do? It basically says whenever let's say I pass in a variable as a dependency, it means whenever this variable changes, right? Whenever this variable changes, meaning I set to do items to another state, or I change the instance of these to do items, this function is going to run again, right? Meaning if I say I want to set this to, I save this guy, first of all, save this guy, and then I make my to-do item yellow first, and I save this guy, it comes back to being yellow, right? I save this guy yellow second, comes back to being yellow. But the minute I remove this guy from a dependency array, right? I save this guy, I move it from the dependency array. I can say save yellow third. When I save, it says, please enter a task. Are we there? So now, we can now understand the difference, the importance of a use effect. So now, what I'm going to teach you is, I'm going to teach you how to set items to the local storage. So now, first of all, let's keep this information somewhere at the back of our minds. Let's look at local storage for a minute. So now, currently, I have 3 items in my to-do items array, right? So I can come here and say, local storage dot set items. So now there are a couple of items, there are a couple of methods on your local storage. So your local storage and your session storage are basically the same thing, implementation wise. It's just the differences in what they imply that sets them apart, right? So now you have set item, which is a method on your local storage to help you set an item to local storage. It helps you put an item in your local storage. You have remove item. It helps you remove an item from your local storage. Local storage.length will give you the total number of items in your local storage. Local storage.key gives you the what's it called? It gives you the key of a particular value in your local storage. Get items helps you get a particular item from your local storage, and then local storage.clear helps you clear every single item that you have in your local storage. So now, if we do this, we can basically say local storage.set item, bearing this in mind, local storage.set item, right? Passing a function, it takes in two parameters. The first parameter is the key, right? The key of what you want to say. So you save items in your local storage in key pair values, right? Basically, what this means is that you can say this to be to do items. So this basically means that this first parameter will be like your label in your local storage to do items, right? And you pass the value you want to pass, right? So with what I've been saying so far, you basically pass your values like this to do items, then you pass local storage or set items to do items, right? But there is a comma in the sense that your local storage only saves items in strings. Now, if I come to my local storage, this is how you access your local storage. Come to application, go to local storage, and open this guy. And then where is this guy? To do items. This is what I currently have, right? And I say, okay, fine, let me add an item. I say add to school. I save this guy. I come back here, and I have object. Why do I have object? Because first of all, I'm trying to save this array, add to school. I'm trying to save this array in my local storage that only saves items in strings. So that's when we use the what's it called? The JSON.stringify method, right? To basically turn this to do items into a savable string in our local storage. That basically means that now I can come here and view my application, and I can see to do items is now a stringified version of an array, right? I can say, okay, enter your next task, go home, save this guy, and then this is added to my local storage, right? No matter how many times I reload, no matter how many times, because of the fact that, let me see this, to do items. Okay, so what is happening is that I need to write an algorithm to save whatever it is I have in my local storage first of all, because what is happening is that when I reload and my code reads from top to bottom, I am resetting my local storage to an empty array, right? Because if I come here and say I want my array to be an object of task jelly, right, and an ID of 56, right, an ID of 56, and I save this guy, I'm naturally going to get this as a default value, right? So now, no matter how many times I reload, this is always going to remain in my local storage, right? Let's say I delete this application, and then I come here and I say localhost 3000, right, /home. You can see that I'm still getting jelly. And if I go to my local storage, you still see that my to-do items jelly remains. So now, I now have to write an algorithm, some form of if statement, to always check, can say if, right? So we can say, let's first get items from our local storage. We can say if local storage dot get item, right? What item are we trying to get? It takes in a parameter of, again, trying to get to do items, right? If local storage does get items to do items, you know what, to make this better, let's just set it to a variable. You can say const items from local storage, right? I can say equals this. Items from local storage equals this, right? So I can say if items from local storage. So obviously I would like to, so if I say, if I come here and I log, what's it called? I log, let me see. This to my console, items. I log this to my console. This is where you're going to get a string of this guy, right? But if I say, I want to get this, we know that this is an array of objects. I want this to be an array of objects. I'm going to use the JSON.parse method to pass this value that I have. And then I'm going to get this back as an array of objects, right? It's no longer a stringified array of objects, but an actual array of objects. So I can come here and say JSON.parse equals JSON.parse. Right? So JSON.parse, I can say if item from local storage item.local storage.length, right? Because in this instance, we know that our items from local storage has to be an array. So we can pass the .length property on it and see if items of local storage .length is greater than 0, right? And items from local storage is not equal to undefined, right? So now what do we want to do? We want to say what would we do? We'll get our items from local storage, and then we would set it to do items. We would set to do items to items from local storage, right? We'll do that. So if I save this guy, if I remove this guy from here, items from local storage. So basically, what this means is that we now have a means to get items from our local storage and set it to our to-do items, right? And what do we have here? Too many renders. React renders the limit. All right. So now that's because let me remove this guy. Save items from local storage. So basically what was happening is that the application was rendering itself so many times that it causes React to bug out and cause a defect, right? So there are several ways that we can go about this. We can say, const item this, can pass this in our use effects. Let's see what this happens then. Let me say sets to do items to items from local storage. We save, right? So now we bypass all of this, right? So now, basically what we are saying is that while the page loads, we want to check if item dots from local storage, if there are to-do items in our local storage. If there are, we want to set to-do items to items from local storage, right? So now I can now go ahead and remove this from here, right? And go ahead and remove this from here. And another thing I can decide to do is, another thing to make this work is that on every single time I add a new item to my local storage or add a new item to my array, I'll have to come here and say local storage dot set items. Right now, I'm using to do items as my key. Make sure it's the same text. Pass here and I say JSON dot stringify. JSON dot stringify. What's it called? New array. Right? And then whenever I'm removing an item from the to-do list array, all I have to do is set whatever new array I'm setting to to-do list array, set that array to my local storage, right? So now if I come back to my application, right, I no longer have a default value here and I reload, I'm going to get, what am I going to get? Let me delete this guy. I reload this, right? And I get pick up kids from school. I save this guy. I have this in my console, in my list of items. I say, take kids to school, right? I save this. I have this in my application. Now, if I choose to reload, no matter how many times I choose to reload, this information is still going to be there, unless I decide to delete this guy, then I reload, then it becomes just this information, right? So now we've added persistence to our code, not to our application. Now it looks like a much more reasonable application that you can use. You can basically build this application, use it for your own daily task maintenance, and you can use it to look after yourself, right? So now I'm going to give you an assignment, right? I'm going to give you an assignment to help you, an assignment that goes that you have to find a way to implement a button, right? Find a way to implement a button. First of all, your assignment is to recreate what it is that I have done. That's the first thing. Then you want to find a way to implement a button to clear all the items in your to-do list. All the items in your to-do list, meaning when you click on a button, let's say you have a clear button underneath here, you click on it, every single item in your to-do list disappears, right? So now that is that. And with that, we have come to the end of today's class. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to open the class for questions. If you have any questions whatsoever, was it or any feedback on today's class? Hello, guys. All right, then. Now that we know that we don't have any question or any feedback whatsoever, I'm going to be